Welcome back to another episode of The Root of the Matter. I am your host, Dr. Rachel Carver, and today I'm welcoming Irene Chang. She is a patient of mine who has just recently finished her studies for functional nutrition. Is that correct,
Actually,
Irene?
it's a functional medicine certified health coaching program.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So I've asked Irene to come in a little bit, talk about nutrition because it's very confusing. People think, okay, yes, I should eat fruits and vegetables, but should I eat meat? Should I not eat meat? And then you've got the whole carnivore crowd that says, no, vegetables are terrible for you. And so there's just a lot of confusion. And I would love for you to maybe dive in, tell us a little bit. You've been learning the most up-to-date information about nutrition. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you wanted to get this degree and then go from there?
Yes, so my journey started when the lockdown started over 4 years ago now, March 2020. And I was like most people concerned about my immune function against coronavirus. And especially as an older population, we were more threatened, right? Immune function and virus. So then I was always a fan of Dr. Mark Hyman, read a lot of his books. So I started to listen to his podcast and read more books and really studied about functional medicine, which is more of finding root cause for your symptoms rather than suppressing symptoms and managing it with medications and procedures for all the chronic disease that most people suffer from nowadays. That just led me to learn a lot more about what is the current information, which a lot of times the medical schools don't teach those things. And since they're not on the licensing exam for medical doctors, and who has time to read all about newest studies and newest information from various literature? Doctors don't have time. So there's a big gap, I think, what's been happening last, I would say, like 20 years, even like a microbiome, human genome project, all these things that happen. And what the medical field is still working with, right, for the patients and dealing with the chronic diseases, especially. So that led me. So once I learned so much about it and all the misinformation, I would say that we have been told by the government, like the food pyramid, or the doctors or media, especially the media, promoting all the big food companies promoting this and that and this and that. Remember the ad, got milk? They had to take it down because there was no basis for science, things like that. So then I was like, I'm learning all this stuff and I'm like floored by this. Like, wow, we have been so misinformed. How is this possible? So then that led me to like, what can I do as an individual? I am practicing it. I make sure my husband practices it. But then I felt like this is something that I would like to share with other people because so many of these diseases, the top disease like cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune, Alzheimer, all these can be prevented if you can work on having better lifestyle choices, right? Every day, day in out, day. What do you do? What are the choices one makes? So that's why I wanted to be a health coach, because health coach is a new thing. Nobody really knows. They know the trainer, physical trainer, they might know business coaching, but the health coaching is still fairly new. It was only started to getting national board license or not license, certification by national board only like 2014. It's fairly new. This insurance doesn't cover it, but there are now a lot of functional medicine doctors who understand that in order for their patients to get better, they really need to change their behaviors. It's not about what they're telling them, what to eat, the supplements. It's about really what are they going to change to eat and move and how to sleep better, how to deal with their daily chronic stress and or their relationships, all these things that we are dealing with day to day.
Yeah. I did my certification in 2015, right, when it was brand new, and my dream for future medicine is that there are health coaches on every single staff of every internist, just at a minimum,
Mhm.
right? Because doctors don't, especially with the way that medicine's become so corporate, right? They have 8 to 10
Yeah.
minutes with a patient. You can't make any lasting
No.
change with somebody if you just wanna give them a medication, okay, but people are pushing back against that kind of medicine. They're tired of taking so many medications and still not really feeling better, so it is the role of coaches, and the other thing too is that health is so
Yes.
individual,
Yes.
right? And so you the blanket statement of eat this or don't eat this or do this and don't doesn't help because we all know that we should eat an apple versus a bag of
Right.
Doritos. Like people know which one is healthier, but why do we reach for the
Right.
Doritos versus the
Yep.
apple, right? And the health coach has that time to figure out why are you sabotaging
Yep.
your health when you on a logical level you know
Mhm.
better, right? There's always something underlying, the stress, the emotional trauma, you
Yeah.
name it. And so that's the value of having a coach. And it's unfortunate that insurance doesn't cover they lag behind anything that's
Exactly.
valuable for a long,
Exactly.
long time. But if you think about the value of having somebody, if you're really willing to try to make those changes, like maybe 2025 is that year that you are really gonna put what you want into practice, then think about the cost. How much do you spend on Starbucks
Yeah.
every day, right? Think about those kind of how much that adds up. Would it be more valuable putting that 5 to $10 a day into a monthly coaching session? Maybe then the coach will teach you how to make your own delicious latte, right?
Absolutely.
At home.
Absolutely. With a much better health outcome. Yeah, it's kind of like a peeling onions. People, the health coaches basically help clients to find out what their health goal is, realistic, right? It's the SMART goal. It's a specific and measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive goals, like 3 to 6 months, let's say. But there's a motivational interview that goes in to really peel the onion layers of why do you really want to do this? Because when
Mhm.
it comes from the client, not from doctors or nutritionists, but when it comes to client, they have the agency to change because that's their own, it's a client driven. So health coaches are like just like a GPS. I mean, like you want to go someplace you haven't been to or you have not been successful, because after all, people try to have better diet and most people 80% something like that fails, right? And they end up gaining more weight. And so having somebody who is like a guide or cheerleader or support, like a little cane or actually a guide going on a hike. You don't know the road. How did
Exactly.
you want to go to top? The client decide where they want to go, and coach is basically very empathetic partner who help them to navigate better. And then when there's a success, they celebrate. When there's a failure, then they refigure it out. So I think it's a really good way to make small changes that's sustainable because that's
Absolutely. And what you keep saying is so important, right? Because this is patient
mhm,
driven. It's not the coach is not somebody to tell
no,
you
no,
what to eat, but just exactly what you said. The patient is telling you or the client, whatever, is saying, this is a goal that I would like, but I need a little bit
no,
help in achieving that goal. And that is what the
yeah,
coach is there for. But you have to meet a person, where they're at,
right,
right? It's the same thing you come in for a dental appointment. Maybe you go to a new dentist and you're like, okay, what do I need? And maybe that dentist says you need 5 crowns and you need all this deep cleaning and all these kind of stuff. And a lot of times patient will just walk out the door because that's not you're telling them
yeah,
instead of saying, "What are you
yes,
hoping to
well,
here's what I see." Obviously, we as a dentist, I
yeah,
have to tell if you have the disease, but if the patient doesn't want to believe you, they don't
mhm,
trust you, if it's not one of their goals or values to have a very healthy mouth, they're not gonna do it, and so there's that art to working with people? You're trying to understand their values and meet them where
And
they're at.
also there's the accountability part so that we check in.
Mm.
At least
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be long term. I say 3-4 months and the regular check-ins, and then there's accountability and client decide how they want to track their progress. And when that doesn't go well, because there's always also environmental factor and like, oh, I wanted to do this by my children, my husband, my oh, I can't. So then how do you reevaluate and come up with different ways to deal with to get to that goal? There's a lot of working collaborative also.
And that's a great point too, and that's why I know a lot of things, but I need that accountability. I myself
Yeah,
work with health even though I am the health coach, but I need
we all
somebody
do.
to help hold me accountable. Absolutely. I think that's a huge, huge value with having somebody there because we can all say certain things and then whatever life happens, right? And
Yeah.
we fall out and we forget why we were doing things. Yes, that's hugely valuable because like, so many people make I don't remember the statistic, right? But how many of us make resolutions and
Yeah.
then by the end of
Yeah.
January, it's
Oh
already
yeah. They
kaput.
think.
So let's talk a little bit about maybe
Mhm.
nutrition and maybe you mentioned the food pyramid. Why is the current, now it's my
Yes.
plate, right?
Yes.
They've taken the pyramid. Tell us about how, what the my plate talks about and maybe if your agreement or disagreement with how it's laid out.
I think the My Plate is much better than Food Pyramid, which also reminds you how they want us to eat like 6 times a day. Remember, it was like every 2 hours you have to eat, otherwise your metabolism is gonna go, which is actually the exact opposite because it keeps spiking your blood sugar every time you eat, and people are supposed to eat a lot of carbohydrate grains especially, so it was just to keep spiking and spiking, and a lot of times it would start that glucose spike roller coaster up and down, so of course people would be tired and want to eat something after eating whatever, the muffin and the orange juice and coffee. 2 hours later you're hungry already and like becomes hypoglycemic. I think it's better because there's a lot more emphasis on vegetables and fruits and vegetables rather than grain. However, I think depending on where people are, I think there's still, to me, there's too much, again, emphasis on starch, mainly grain, because unless your fasting insulin is like perfect under 3 or something, people really should be watching out with their carb, especially the starch, besides sugar, of course, sugar, but starch consumption, because as we get older, we just become more insulin resistant ourselves, and it's a lot harder to metabolize those starch going in and spiking the blood sugar, because more you do it, more insulin resistance happens. And that's basically the beginning of all chronic disease, the insulin resistance and inflammation that follows. So to me, I think there should be even more emphasis on vegetables and a little bit of a fruit, the less sweet fruits. And then, of course, the protein thing is always so controversial. And I think it depends on the people, what they want to eat. Some people don't like the taste of meat, or some people don't want to eat because of the religious reasons. But to me, I eat all of the food. I've always done that and ate a lot more fish because I'm from South Korea. And Korea, just like Japan, is a peninsula. Japan's an island. So I just grew up eating a lot of seafood because it's abundant. We didn't eat a lot of meat because it wasn't abundant. And if you think of Asian food, generally East Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, we just eat a lot of more vegetables. So if there's a meat, not the main thing. I was always shocked, like, oh my God, there's a huge meat with a little bit of vegetable. No, it's the other way around. Lots of vegetables, a little bit of meat mixed in. So to me, the protein part is individual, but I think if you eat more protein on regular basis, in other words, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it makes you full. you don't get as hungry because it lasts in your system longer, as well as we need protein to synthesize our muscle and minimize our muscle loss as we get older. So I think it's really important to have enough protein. And I tell all my clients the most important thing is to start the breakfast with at least like 30 grams of protein. Protein heavy meal should be breakfast. So when you're eating the first meal after fasting overnight, that has to be protein-rich food so that you're not hungry at least like 4 or 5 hours. Because if you're hungry after eating first meal in 2, 3 hours, that wasn't adequate. And that's not a good idea because it should make you feel full and not have a craving for sugar. I just think that eating a lot more vegetable is very important because that also gives you fiber, which is so important to feed your gut bacteria. Without it, your microbiome is being starving. And if they don't eat, if you don't feed them, they might eat your own mucin layer and make it leaky gut, make holes, and then all the stuff that you don't want to put it into your blood is not going in. This is what you don't want to do. Mixing your blood with the food or food, whatever the leftover things, unclean stuff, right? That should be kept away. But when you have a leaky gut, which part of the reason is not feeding microbiome, and they don't produce what's keeping the gut lining healthy, like the butyrate, which is so important to make sure your gut lining is tight. So if you don't do that, then you're going to compromise your gut lining, and that creates leaky gut, which is probably the number one way to create inflammation.
I totally agree. And this is what fascinates me about the carnivore diet. I've spoken on the podcast before. My brother-in-law lost over 100 pounds last year he did carnivore. He started last January, and it's amazing. His cardiologist was so floored that now he and his wife, who are in their 70s, started carnivore.
All right.
They were like, they couldn't, because my brother-in-law had a heart attack at 25 years old.
Wow.
So he's been followed by this cardiologist. He's almost 50 now. And so the cardiologist has seen over 25 years his numbers and everything, and was just floored. But I'm always curious, like, I really want to do a stool test on him because I'm like, what if you have no fiber? Like, what does your microbiome look like in there? But some people, he's thriving. Like every ailment he ever had gone. He looks amazing. He feels amazing. So and this is where I think when we talk about food, individuality is really important, right? Somebody like me who's still cycling, like that, going carnivore, I don't have any weight to lose, and I need carbohydrates to make hormones, right?
Yeah.
And like, again, to feed the microbiome. So it's very interesting to me. And this is where I think when all these new companies are coming out with all these specific genetic things where you can say, what is the best diet for me? So there's some kind of companies out there who are trying to do that. And my husband just bought me this little breathing device. It's called Lumen.
Oh,
And the goal is to try to, this is by breathing different times of the day, depending what you eat and what you exercise. I'm not exactly sure the physiology behind it. I haven't studied much about it, but helps you try to maximize your metabolism. Because as you were saying, when our metabolism is working well, and that doesn't mean eating every 2 hours, right? But when your metabolism is working well and your insulin levels are controlled, that's where you get health, and that's where you get longevity, right? And so it's really interesting. You breathe into this thing, and somehow by your breath, it can tell how much carbs or fat you are burning. And that determines when you first wake up in the morning, ideally you should be in fat burn right before you go to bed, according to the Lumen. Again, I don't know all of the science on that, but that's how they're gauging. And over 30 days, it tracks you for like 30 days, and then kind of gives you an idea of what's happening. So it can try to help you, again, individualize. And again, I've been doing it for a couple of days, and I'm not sure it's perfect there, but it's interesting and it's cool. There's so many more wearables and things that help us track things, right? Like heart rate, our sleep, all these things. But I agree with you. I think what you said about protein is really, really important, that the older we get, especially, the more protein we
Yeah,
need. And sometimes that's tough because the older we get, also our digestive capability goes
right.
down, right? We don't have much stomach acid, our digestive, and so it's
Yeah, don't
harder
absorb as
to
much.
digest,
Yeah, you don't absorb it.
right? So that's where I talk to so many of my patients about apple cider vinegar, like even betaine hydrochloride, right? Like a little extra stomach acid to little things, the lemon water, right? These little kind of things to try to get your stomach at. So many people are on, the
Yes,
PPIs
yeah. Oh,
for
yeah, I know,
reflux, and it's
I
like the
know.
worst thing. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that because I think that is such a common
Yeah.
medication. So tell us a little bit. So is acid reflux a sign of having too much acid in your
It
stomach?
the thing is, I think that all that GERD and PPI problem, it should be dealt with eating properly, again, and not eating too late, and sometimes it's a sleep apnea too. But taking this PPI for long term, I think they said, and the pharmaceuticals, when they came out with it, and initially in 1980s, they say, oh, you should only be taking for six weeks. But then people are taking them for years and years, and there's a lot of problem with side effects from that. So I think that one needs to be tapering it off. That's what the doctors recommend, not relying on this, but changing their diet so that, yeah, maybe you don't want to eat tomatoes and things that would, spicy food, things that would upset your stomach and have an acid reflux. But I think there's a way to not do that. In other words, gradually fix it with diet and lifestyle rather than relying on PPI, which has a lot of side effects.
And this is where a health coach is so like, this is one of the things I think health coaches can help with the
Mm,
most is how do I get my digestion more
yeah,
ideal? And again, like you said, I have patients every day who say, "Yep, I've been on this for a
yeah, and
decade."
that's
And I think, "Oh my lord." And there's all this science showing that it causes
oh
food
my god.
allergies, food sensitivity, like all sorts, because I tell patients, "Why do you think your stomach is supposed to be of an acid of 2?
Mm,
And now you're gonna stop producing
you're
acid. How
gonna
are
have
you going to
problems,
digest
right?
anything?" And then the stomach acid is what produces the bicarb. It's what produces your digestive enzymes, which produce the
Don't break
bile. Like,
down food and yeah,
no, if you can't break
yeah.
down anything, so it's really problematic.
That's
But
why
again,
people can be malnutritious when they eat so
exactly.
much, but they're not getting nutrient in, and they're not breaking down, and all these things relate to each other. So they're not making enzymes, they're not making hormones, and you could eat all you want, but if they're not being absorbed and metabolized, then what good does that do?
Exactly, and I think that's something that I suffered for a long time was I could eat everything, I could never gain anything, and with my eczema, I wasn't breaking things
Oh,
down properly. My digestion was really just shot.
one
Wow.
of the important tools that we have as a health coach is elimination diet, because that is 21-day elimination diet. And I've done that with several of my clients. And it's not like that you can't eat them forever, like the gluten, dairy, corn, sometimes eggs and shellfish, but you figure it out by eliminating for 21 days and introducing it slowly one by one. Caffeine is another one. But then that does not mean you can't have them for rest of your life, but it just heals the gut, and dosage matter. Some people could have some of the cheese, but then they can't have a lot of them. And so you're figuring it out so you could live with the food without constantly um, affecting your gut lining and having leaky gut, which then, of course, inflammation and all the problems, metabolic problems, just all the problems. So fixing the gut lining by having elimination diet works well.
That was the first thing I
Well,
did 14 years ago. I took wheat out of my I was
yeah,
on all these steroid
yeah,
creams, took wheat out of my diet for 4 weeks, and my hands cleared
yeah.
90%. And that's all I did, and I was like, "Oh, geez." And the cool thing about the gut, it turns over in days, right? and so it can heal relatively quickly, but when we're constantly
Yes.
eating it, so it's amazing. And the benefit of this, like you said, is like some people don't like to diet. They don't want to do this because they don't want to feel restricted. Like I can never go out to eat and I can, but again, if
Well,
you just take 3 weeks to remove one thing, and for me, to have my hands clear 90%, I mean, it
wow.
was so excruciating, itchy. Like to me, I
Wow.
was like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sold.
Yeah.
When you have
Yeah.
that kind of a
Yeah.
win without having to take medications of just doing one
Yeah.
simple thing, as much as I love bread, it was like, but I was like, I can't take it
Yeah, but
anymore, right? I'm in
you
such
can now
agony.
have there's so much
Yeah.
gluten-free stuff, and that's one of the things I help. Same thing with my husband
Mhm.
too. He found that gluten sensitivity is not a celiac, but gluten, but it affects not only your gut, your skin, but your brain. You don't want to get dementia when you get older because of gluten. There's so much you can do now by substituting, replacing. You don't have to feel deprived at all. He makes his own cookies now with almond flour and all the. So I think those are the things that also health coaches can help with a pantry, eliminating certain things by replacing it. There's people don't have, I don't feel people have to feel deprived. I think it's just the making smart choices and making changes and adapting to it because like you said, the benefit is huge. Yeah.
We talked a little about protein. Let's talk about fat a little bit. What is like the newest science in bed about fat? I've talked about a lot on this podcast. We've had somebody on talking about this, which is a big problem.
The seed oil problem, I think it's that's really real because first of all, and most people get seed oil from ultra processed food and they put soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, all these seed oils because they make the products last long and it's cheap. So when people consume ultra processed food, meaning all the stuff that's manufactured food, not the real food, we're not talking about like tomato with the water and salt in a jar. We're talking about the stuff that's packaged, all the chips, the snacks, all the packaged food, which is a lot of. When I go grocery shopping, I look at other people's cart. I'm like, oh my God, it's really sad. But all that food has seed oil and the omega-6 seed oil from them. One, it has all the pesticide anyway, all the GMO with the pesticide. But those seed oil, as I understand it from like the Dr. Ben Bickman, who talks about this extensively, it really is, those are the omega-6 oil from seed oil, right? Mainly, that's the one that creates oxidized fat in our lipid. And it's not the cholesterol, it's not the LDL, it's actually the oxidized LDL that causes cardiovascular disease and stroke. And they are mainly coming from seed oil. So it's not the saturated fat. Like coconut oil is very healthy food. And when I think of 1/3 of the global population, they live on coconut oil. And they have a
Mhm.
lot less dementia and neurodegenerative disease than we do because of coconut oil consumption. Saturated fat is not the devil, in other words. It depends. And I think there's 7, 8 different saturated fat anyway. But it seems from the latest science, the seed oil is really a problem. It's a inflammatory, it's a pro-inflammatory fat versus like omega-3 fat from fish and seafood. That's anti-inflammatory. So they're like the opposite. So we need to, and American people don't really eat as much seafood as other countries. So we need to consume a lot more seafood, especially the small fish that has a lot of small fatty fish that has omega-3. And if we can't do it for whatever the reason, then we need to take supplements so that it's an anti-inflammatory. It's good for your brain. It's really essential, right, for health and metabolism and also the brain. That's so important. And of course, if there's one thing people can do is basically reduce, stop eating those manufactured food. That's really, if you could just eat what nature made.
It's funny when you talk about the supermarket, I have the hardest time going because I the same way. When you know stuff, you're like, none of that food. But 90% of stuff in grocery stores isn't real food, at least in America. It's not real food because it's cheap and it's fast. And the lifestyle we all live is we're all tired. We don't want to cook. We're all moms and dads are working. And it's it's a shame, but it's very hard and it can be stressful going. I was just in the supermarket yesterday and I was thinking, you go into the healthy aisles, right? There isn't a single like granola bar that doesn't have seed. I love there's with this new brand called Junkless. And like one of the first ingredients is canola oil. I'm like, my lord, like what do you think is junk if you put canola oil in your Junkless? But I have yet to find a granola bar that doesn't have a seed oil in it. And that's why, like, one of my things is, like, I've got to make one because yes, ideally, it'd be great if we all eat health food, but let's be realistic. Sometimes we need something on the go, right?
They're not in supermarket.
Oh,
You can find them online, like whether it's Bulletproof or Paleo Valley and all these companies, direct to
yeah,
consumer, they're not in grocery stores. Yeah, no, you really
no,
have to seek out because the companies are out there making them without any seed oils, but they're not in supermarkets.
no. My other favorite one is the raw bars, RAWR. They're really good. They have a lot of good
Mm.
flavors too. So that's a good one. And you have to keep them refrigerated,
Well, that makes
but
sense.
totally
Well,
yes, the same thing. I have to order them
yeah,
online. But it's hard. It's hard to and then those things obviously are more
yes.
expensive. So it's a challenge. Eating healthy doesn't have to be expensive, and I think that's a big misconception a lot of people have. So we know that there are certain foods, okay, if we can't afford all organic, what at least are the things, right? If you have a banana, that
Yeah,
has a thick
that's
skin.
fine.
So it's eat a
Oh, yeah.
regular banana, but a
Avocado, yeah,
strawberry
onions, all these things, you're not eating skin, so yeah, no, that's fine, yeah.
But like a strawberry,
Oh,
right, that
yeah,
the pesticides are able to go in easier. So that's what you wanna think of. If someone has a thicker skin, it may be okay to
yeah,
not eat
I
organic, but berries,
yeah.
they absorb a lot more of the
Actually,
pesticide.
to me, the best way to shop is buy frozen, organic frozen fruits. I always do because it's so much cheaper and better actually to buy organic frozen blueberries or strawberries, any of these fruits because they were frozen at the time of harvest, which was actually better than staying in the supermarket shelf for
They have the most
yeah,
nutrition because that's the other thing. When you're buying organic, it may have been picked
yeah,
weeks ago, and then it had to travel,
exactly.
so far that by the time it gets you, maybe it doesn't have a pesticide, but it
Yeah.
also doesn't have the
I
nutrients,
don't
right?
even
So
trust
it's
like salmon. I'd rather buy frozen, wild caught frozen salmon
Mhm.
because they did it right then when they caught it and processed it instead of like how long, who knows if they were frozen and defrosted and then looks fresh. So I don't trust them. We do have a nice, some of these local farms, like regenerative farms that
we're
we're
lucky where
very
we live
lucky.
that they're
We're lucky. Have a,
they're coming more and
yeah,
more. Yes, there's a new one right where I live that they just bought this great farm and the whole idea it's all regenerative,
that's awesome.
and it's so exciting. You can see they must have, I don't know, 100 sheep grazing
Wow.
now in apple orchards that had gone to rot and so I
That's
cannot wait. I'm
awesome.
very because I have to order all my meat and seafood and have it shipped to the house because I just don't, like you said,
Yeah.
anything in the grocery was being
Yeah.
super
I get them
fresh.
from Square Root Farm in Lanesboro. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and to me also vegetable, people always say like, "Oh, I don't have time to cook vegetables." But you know what? If you buy organic frozen vegetables, like whether it's just spinach or kale or even mushrooms, they're already cut up and all you need to do is take it out of your freezer and dump it. Either you want to do make a stew or a stir fry, it's so much easier and you're cutting out all that time that you have to wash and cut. And I think to me, when you do that, the cooking becomes a really simple and doesn't take a lot of time. And if you have mixed, like I mix my own herbs already. So I put all the Italian herbs and some allspice herbs and I make my own. So I might have like herbs that 12 of them already mixed in. So I put a lot of herbs and spices when I cook. whether it's just stir frying or marinating meat or making a lot of stews, especially when it's colder. Soup, soup too, but I make a lot of stews because then you can make a one meal dish with more substance than soup. So when you have all that done already, and then I also make sauces. So if you have like 2, 3 different flavor of sauce by mixing different ingredients, and you can keep it in the refrigerator. You could put some ginger and garlic if it's an Asian sauce. You mix oyster sauce with the black bean sauce and hoisin sauce and some sesame oil, and it's already with the garlic, and that's already made. All you need to do is pour them when you stir fry it. You could put some tofu or chicken or salmon, whatever, but it really doesn't take more than 15, 20 minutes.
And that's amazing, because I think that's one big complaint people say, I don't have time. But right, you said instead of, and that's why people buy the processed foods, because it's easier to just take the jar off the shelf. But again, most of those have the seed oils in them. They have all sorts of GMO products and pests, you name it. That's one thing that when I was trying to coach people too, is like, you can do it, but you have to plan for it, right? So maybe you pick one day, whether it's a weekend or one night a week, where I'm going to make the Asian sauce. Or my favorite sauce is chimichurri, which with the cilantro and the parsley. I love that with meat or chicken, with anything. I love having that. And it's not that to make, right? A couple of ingredients, you blend them in the blender and
make
boom.
a batch. Yeah, make a batch. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have that in the fridge. So on the other busy weeknights, you throw some chicken in, you put your sauce on, you pour out the, like you said, the frozen vegetables. Again, those are going to have the most nutrient density. I'm like you. I always have frozen peas. Always. And then the mixture of the other vegetables too. But it's one vegetable, without a doubt, I can get my kids to eat the peas. It has a good combination of the carbs and the protein, and it's green. So that's, and it just takes a little bit of
and
planning.
I make, let's say, I make like 4 portions. So if I'm making a, let's say, black rice with vegetable, which is one of my signature dish, people love it, and I make it, I would eat quarter of it, and I divide them up in the portions and freeze them in a glass or stainless steel, and then label them. You have the side dish already. You've got the vegetables, lots of vegetables, and some rice. So you've got it. So all you need is protein. And you take it out the night before. Okay, what am I going to eat tomorrow night? Okay, I'll take it out, put it in the refrigerator. So it's going to defrost by itself. And then by the time dinner comes along, all you need to do is reheat it, have some sort of a protein, which is pretty easy to make while you're reheating that stuff, right? Or you already have some. Or open a couple cans of sardine. This is so great. And I cook a lot of like the salmon in the can, wild caught salmon, which like a tuna, but use that. The other day I made a sardine cake, like a crab cake, but with the sardine, you don't even have to do anything, right? You just take it out of the can, mush it up with some other stuff. Oh, I use a lot of capers. Capers are great, so nutritious, and then automatically adds saltiness and umami flavor. So mix some of them, and then you pan fry it. It's done in 15 minutes. It's no big deal. Health coaches can help because I can figure out, like, okay, what are the vegetables, what are the protein, what are the grains or things, what do you like to eat? Like, do you like eating cauliflower? Okay, let's make a big batch of mashed cauliflower using frozen cauliflower. And it's easy. Again, you can divide them up and make 4 different servings. And then you've got it, vegetable and carb together. Cauliflower is an amazing food. God, it has...
My favorite, my kids love to make quesadillas, but again, like with all the grains and all the stuff. So I had one time, my best friend in Texas sent me some cauliflower tortillas. And they were the most, usually if you try to buy them in the store, they're anything gluten-free, just breaks easily, right? Doesn't stay nice and folded like a burrito. And she sent me these, and they're like, even my kids were totally fooled. They had no idea, because cauliflower can have a strong taste. And I called them and I said, okay, but how can you make them so
Mhm.
good? And they taste exactly like flour tortillas. And it's cauliflower and butter and baking
There
powder.
you go.
I don't know the exact recipe. Oh my god! And so I order them from Texas. I get a huge box
Nice.
sent to me, and I freeze them
Ooh,
because they will thaw very easily, and they are the most. So that's like in the morning if I'm in a hurry, I'll make some scrambled eggs,
yeah,
throw it in my little
yeah,
tortilla, and it's
yeah,
amazing. It's that's a nice
yeah.
easy
I
thing to
do
have.
that too. I do the cauliflower thins, the round one, instead of the bread. That's so great for breakfast with some little bit of avocado egg and some smoked salmon. Perfect breakfast. And I wear the CGM, it gets 10, the perfect score. So,
Mhm,
yeah, I think
mhm.
it's just
Yeah.
and you don't have to know so much. People usually eat same food. There's a repertoire of same food. So once you figure it out how to do it and how to shop and cook quickly, you're fine. You don't have to like think about like what am I gonna eat? You got them. You've got some in the refrigerator already in the freezer because you make.
What do you think? So maybe tell us a little bit more about some staples you think of. Already mentioned frozen vegetables, frozen fruit. What are some other like pantry staples
Well,
to be able to make a healthy,
yeah,
good meal?
in terms of snack, that definitely nuts and seeds. Those are great. And I also just got some unsweetened coconut flakes. So you can mix nuts and whatever, all kinds of nuts, walnuts, pistachio, whatever, almond, all the nuts. Hazelnut is great too. And you mix them with a little bit of coconut flakes, and because it adds again great source of fiber. And you could have some dark chocolate if you don't want to have any sugar. You can have the littlest chocolate that has a stevia in it, and so you that's a great snack, right? So if you in terms of pantry for the dry food, I have like a dried shiitake mushroom. Again, you can just put it in the water, so you don't have to have it in the refrigerator. You can put them in the water for an hour before, and it's a beautiful and healthy and flavorful mushroom that you can put it into stir fry or stew or soup. I also use seaweed as a snack too. Even like a sardine, people think, ooh, I don't like sardine. But if you actually take, let's say, seaweed, which is always cutting, you buy cut up seaweed, which has some sesame oil or olive oil on it. You can wrap, let's say, sardine, right, in a seaweed. And I put kimchi because I have kimchi. I'm Korean, so I always have kimchi. So piece of kimchi and sardine, and I wrap it with the seaweed, and that's great. And it's very nutritious, the seaweed. I have jars of like tomato in water. Always buy the Italian ones because they are skinless. And like artichokes, in jar. Olives when I'm really hungry. I always just eat olives first. I'm like, oh, I'm starving. I can't wait. Okay, I'm gonna pop in a half dozen olives right away so that I don't feel like I'm hungry. You always want to have some guacamole thing so you can eat with a celery or a cucumber easily. And again, great snack or appetizer. What else do I have? And I use a lot of black rice instead of white or brown rice because it has you
All
get more
those,
nutrition. You
yeah.
freeze them, you cook it a big batch again, you freeze them so then they come out, and then as long as they're defrosted, you could even microwave to heat them up again. Very versatile, right? To mix with things.
Mhm.
So yeah, that works well. What else? I have a lot of frozen food. I really use a lot of frozen veggies so that in case I didn't go to supermarket or farmer's market, I still have a plenty of vegetables that I can just quickly cook because again, I think vegetables are better cooked.
Yeah. And then if you listen to some of these people who are in the carnivore, right, and they're saying, "Oh, there's so many anti-nutrients in
Yeah.
vegetables." Whole thing, right? Some people are like Dave Asprey, right? He hates raspberries, and he's sensitive, right? Not everybody has an oxalate sensitive. So, but when you cook these things, you properly cook them, it takes away the answer. And same thing with even with nuts and seeds. If you sprout them, which you can buy sprouted nuts and seeds, it takes away some of those anti-nutrients that some people will say. And then if you think about bread, but think about sourdough bread, the way that that's fermented, right? Also, it eats a lot of the sugar in the bread. So the way foods are prepared also, why is kimchi so great? Same thing, it's fermented, right? And that is huge for our
I think that's same thing with the quinoa too. The way Americans cook is not that's not how it's cooked. They're supposed to be fermented, and I think every culture, traditional culture, has fermented food because that's how we preserve that. It's better for you, right? With all the microbiome and breaking down.
yes, versus the seed oils to preserve. Yeah, we've switched fermentation because it takes such a long time. And still, the same thing about bread. It is not hard to bake a loaf of bread, but a homemade, if you make your kids sandwiches, say for lunch, maybe it lasts 2 or 3 days, but it lasts 2 or 3 days and you don't have to put any of the other stuff in it.
The other one that I recently started to use is mung beans. Do you know mung beans? It has so much protein. I had no idea compared to other beans. So mung beans are very easy to cook, and it can become part of like a batter too, making up pancakes and stuff. So I've been using that too, which is great. And I use in the Korean cuisine, I use the noodles made out of sweet potato. It's That's a staple of Korean cuisine, and that's the noodle dish. You can order from any Korean restaurant, and so you have vegetables, sometimes meat and not meat, whatever. But the carb is sweet potato because it's 100% sweet potato noodles.
That's my favorite food. I think sweet potatoes. I absolutely do. That's why I loved it. Back in the years, I tried the paleo, and that was my go-to always with the meat and the sweet potatoes.
Mm.
Just, which is interesting because they're very high, like in progesterone, which I think was something my body was really, and that's the other thing, like cravings, right? That can tell you something your body is needing. And I think about like my kids, and they've gone through these phases where they'll be like really into a certain food, and then all of a sudden one day they're like, no, I don't like it anymore. And you think, what do you mean? You liked it yesterday. But then the more I got into the science of nutrition, I think, maybe their body
Yeah,
now is sufficient in that
yeah.
specific nutrient that now they
Yeah, I
don't
think
care for it
especially if
anymore.
it's a natural food. I think the problem with the children now, I think they're so used to eating ultra processed food, they've lost the ability. It's basically hijacked. We all have that innate
Yes.
ability to crave something when we're lacking nutrition. But if they don't eat natural food growing up, and they have no idea, and they just keep eating all these manufactured food like stuff, then they lost that ability, which is really.
They do, and it messes up all
Yeah.
the hormones and the satiety
Yeah.
signals and all of that because of the way that those foods stimulate,
Yes.
right, the nervous system in a not so
Yeah.
good way,
And there's
and you never really feel full on that
and they're
stuff.
supposed to be so tasty anyway because of that. They have that the combination of the sugar, the fat, the salt, the crunchiness, all this snacks and sweetness, because that's what they go for. That's their manufacturing for that bliss point, so that people get addicted. And that's really, yeah, I don't know. It worries me about that.
And too, trying to raise 2 teenagers who, trying to tell them, "Hey, what you're eating now is going to affect your future health,"
That
right? I started with the leaky gut, everything started for me as a teenager. I had acne, and so it was on years of antibiotics, right? It, like, destroyed
I
my gut. And it was on birth control for a long time. That also destroys your gut. Then I went on acne. Oh, jeez, So and then now, the X-Men, everything I think is a result of my predisposition. And then I had 2 babies and a stressful job and all, and there's just snowballs, but we're trying to teach them because they don't feel necessarily bad now. So it's hard for them to understand that they need to do better. But my 16-year-old, she's already coming around, and I was talking to my last podcast. She gave me a list. She's like, I need to eat these foods to have clear skin. And I was like, fantastic. So she said, Mom, I need oysters. And I was like, yes, they're a very good source of zinc, right? So we went down to Guidos, and there was only one person there. So he said, I don't have time to shuck them for you. So like, all right, we'll have to try them in a restaurant. Right? So when we were in Florida for Thanksgiving and we went to a seafood restaurant, so she was able to try oysters, which I don't, they're too slimy for me. I don't love them, but we got a great video of both my 13 and 15-year-old trying the oysters. So it was like, okay, they're opening them. And this was my child who is the pickiest eater on the planet. And so it's very exciting to see her. Yes, yes, to see her eating it because she wants to have clearer skin and she knows she needs zinc. So it's like now that she's motivated to do it, right? And so I think that's the hard thing as a parent is I was always trying to push, push, push instead of just saying, give them the choices, and like just exposing them to a lot of things without being pushy because they're coming back around.
That's great.
Well, we're coming up to almost the end of our time. Is there any other little tidbits or nuggets or anything important that you think we should know?
I think if people really want to change their projector health outcome, they really should work on lowering their insulin resistance. And the way that works really comes from food. And if you don't put sugar and starch, and especially like fructose, all the juices, orange juice, if you don't put them into your body, then there's a less reason for pancreas to release insulin constantly, and it creates that insulin resistance. And it's really a scary thing because most doctors don't order, and people have no idea what their fasting insulin level is. They only know the fasting glucose, which is just a snapshot of that morning. And fasting insulin goes at least a decade before. So I wish people can get their fasting insulin level from their doctor and lab blood work so they know where they are, so they can project, okay, if I keep going this way 10 years later, I may end up having Alzheimer's. You know what I mean? This needs to be installed in people. And I think that's what I'm trying to share with you.
So important. And I'm glad you brought that up because, and especially what you just said, I want to reiterate that it's not just about the diabetes, but Alzheimer's. And they're calling Alzheimer's now diabetes
Exactly.
type 3. And it is true. Like and then you mentioned a CGM, which is a continuous blood glucose monitor, and which is available to all of us. I recently, my HbA1c, which is a kind of a measure of the insulin over time, was creeping up a little bit. So I was like, huh. And so I ordered one. It was like $100 for 2 months. It's called Stelo, Stelo. You don't need a doctor's prescription or anything. It's not, there are other programs that are better that give you more data. It's a good stepping stone. And it's so easy to use. It's not uncomfortable. And so then you can kind of track. When I eat an apple, what happens? Or because it's really interesting because maybe an apple spikes my blood sugar, but it doesn't.
Exactly. It's individual. Yeah. It might spike people eating oatmeal for heart health, but it might spike really high for some people. So they need to know.
So important. Yeah. And I think the thing about that, what you can learn about is food combination, because what I discovered with mine was that if I eat fat and protein first and then have my carb after, my insulin doesn't go high. But if I eat the carb first, so most mornings I would pop one macadamia nut, and then have a scrambled egg and then maybe eat my fruit, or if I was going to have oatmeal or something. And that's really interesting. I know I had one of my favorite places to go is Mario's, and they have their homemade popovers, which I love. And who knows if it's got the glyphosate or whatever, but I'm like, I can't not have my popover. But because I eat like the beans first and I have my protein and the salad, the fiber first,
and the fat,
then my blood sugar spiked by it.
The other thing that it's proven to be very effective is after you eat, if you could just walk 15 minutes or dance a couple songs away, that's going to blunt the spike. So that's going to have less inflammation and less insulin resistance effect building up.
And it's tough where we live because in wintertime, it's harder to get, like you said, just get up and dance a couple of songs, go vacuum the house, right? Or do, some kind of activity. And you'll see that I noticed that tremendously on my CGM too. Yep. Almost immediately. So, well, Irene, thank you. You've given us so much great information. For those of us maybe who are looking for a health coach or want to find out more about it, how can they reach out to you?
I have my website. I think it's going to be listed, but Irene at 3hcoaching.net. And I'd be happy to give complimentary initial consultation and find out what their health goals are and how we can reach their goals. Small steps, tiny steps.
That's right. And if changing your diet and lifestyle is on the top of that list, please reach out to Irene. We will put all of that information in the show notes for you. And again, thank you so much for taking your time this afternoon to tell us a little bit about nutrition and health coaching. I think it's such a valuable tool. So I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rachel Carver, a board-certified naturopathic biologic dentist and a certified health coach. Did you know that over 80% of the U.S. population has some form of gum disease? Many of us don't even know that we have this source of chronic infection and inflammation in our mouth that's been linked to serious consequences like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, dementia, colon cancer, kidney disease, even pregnancy complications. Would you like to learn how to reverse and prevent these chronic debilitating conditions without spending a lot of time and money at the dentist? Join me for my 6-week course where I will teach you the root cause of disease. You'll learn how to be your own best doctor. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.